Hello and welcome to Inside Access Control. Today I have a very special guest, Jonathan Lawry. Jonathan, welcome to the show. Can you please introduce yourself?
All right, glad to be here, Rob. My name is Jonathan Lawry, and I run a firm called Trecerdo, which is a client services engineering firm for manufacturers and integrators in building control and primarily access control at video companies in this industry. And we will develop integrations for manufacturers. We do a lot of wireless lock set work lately, for example, and generally for several month-long project work, and oftentimes we'll do end user work as well.
So you're like the man behind the curtain. I mean, you're like the guy that sits there and nobody knows you really exist. Nobody understands that people like you exist in the industry, but you're like the added benefit for a manufacturer of software or somebody that needs firmware or even integrators that are creating their own platforms for offering to their customers that you can do, and your associates can do firmware, you can do integrations to hardware, you can add features for certain platforms. Is that right? So you're working with a bunch of people behind the curtains that us as users or us as integrators have no idea that there are people like you in the industry.
Well, correct. That's very close to the truth. Yes. So what you have in this industry, each company has their own engineering teams and their own projects. But if you have to add in, let's say, an Apereo integration into your existing access control system, well, your team might not necessarily know all the pitfalls of that particular hardware. And somebody who does know all about Apereo might not necessarily know much about your head-end system. And so myself and my team of minions, as I call them, they're individuals that work in this industry, and they work for me on to help deliver these integrations. Usually they're 2 or 3 month projects, and the value that gives to the manufacturer or the integrator is that they don't have to permanently staff up their engineering team for what might be just a 3 to 6 month hardcore project. So that's what we do, and we got there from most of us have grown up through the industry in terms of actually having worked for some of these manufacturers in the past, some of these integrators in the past, and so I don't like to use the term full stack, but in this case it applies to in a building control system. I and my associates have experience through developing the head-end systems, the control panels, and the readers, as well as the communication and the total architecture of the whole system.
So you're up in New England, right? You're up in Connecticut. Yes. So not that you guys would say this, but I'd say you're wicked smart. And the reality is, what you just said is you do integrations, and it's interesting to look in your background there and see, hey, you've got the ASA Apereo locks, you've got the Allegion Engage locks. Looks like you got some Mercury panels back there. I mean, it's a lot of stuff, and I believe Mercury and Honeywell and a number of others are in your background. And while we can't discuss all the brands that you work for, those are some of the things that you may do behind the curtain. Is that right?
Yes, and it's interesting you mentioned New England and the Boston accent. I did live in Boston for several years as I was starting out in this industry, and I like many people, you get out of school with an unmarketable, useless degree, and you're like, oh, what do I do now? And I was depressed, down on my luck. I sent out my resume everywhere, and I got one call back from Johnson Controls, and they were putting in the card access security system at Logan Airport in Boston. So I went out there, and in an interview, the hiring manager said, there are three qualifications for this job. One, you got to have some analytical skill, and I'll take a flyer on that. And two, you need to wear a pager and basically take a lot of crap from the from everybody. And three, you got to be able to start Monday. And I said, I'm your man. And so I moved to Boston that weekend, and the Johnson guy was right. It was basically being thrown into a pit. But while there, the job, which was not going well at the time, I did my best to improve that system, and then ultimately, my boss and I rewrote that access control system software for the airport, and ultimately that evolved into what's now called Honeywell Prowatch.
Wow! So you took a job on those three premises, and next thing you know, you're writing an access control software foundation, which is obviously today a pretty big brand. That's pretty awesome. So with that knowledge, you've got the insights of hardware, of that software that you've done, the firmware stacks that go into connecting the respective hardware products, panels, reader controllers, wireless lock sets. There's a lot going on in the world today, specifically regarding commercial real estate, and certainly you were present in that transportation vertical as well. What the heck is going on with access control in your mind for the future in this era of COVID, and what do you think of commercial real estate and its applications of access control in a minute or two? What do you think?
Well, okay. I mean, I think obviously COVID has been a negative for many industries, and with access control in particular, access control follows to some extent commercial real estate starts, and there hasn't been a lot of that in recent months. Now, of course, it's a lagging indicator, and it's not perfectly correlative either, because most commercial buildings in North America still don't have any sort of access control. So there's a lot of brownfield construction, brownfield opportunities going on when greenfield commercial real estate starts aren't happening. So I do expect some shakeup over the next couple of months. I think the thing is going to slow down eventually, and I also see things picking up on the I would say quasi-residential side, and people are putting access control on their homes, their home offices, and office sharing facilities that you didn't have before. So So to answer your question more directly, I think things will be slightly slower in the short term. We also see more innovation happening on the residential and in the small business side.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I'm seeing the same thing, and talking to a number of people where we're all working from home, and we are wanting to make sure that not only in cybersecurity are our devices secure, but also our homes are becoming our offices, and we want to have that same experience. we may be buying residential access control locks. A number of us, and I know I'm one. I've got a commercial grade in my house, which is an all-in-one product that uses cloud services, and it's kind of cool. And I get to mess with my kids whether they can get in the house or not. That's kind of great. So I think that's certainly a great trend that we're seeing in that segment of people working from home. Another topic that I've got near and dear to my heart, Jonathan, is the word open. The open platforms, open systems that are secure, enabling standardization, which I think is grossly needed in the access control space. And I look behind your head there and I see a panel. I think it's a Mercury panel. Some would say that's open. It's open if you're part of the Mercury ecosystem, certainly, and they've done a great job. It's not an open platform. It's not a system. It allows multiple softwares to connect to it. What do you think? What do you think of open? What do you think of standardization and access control potentially allowing a proliferation of growth?
Well, that's yeah. I have some strong opinions on the matter, Rob. And you had said regarding Mercury being open, and the Mercury historically has always said that they were lowercase o, open, and not uppercase O, and meaning the end user has options, but yes, it is technically, legally a closed platform. I think the reason why you haven't seen quote unquote open systems in access control and building control as much is because the way that access control and to some extent video is sold, in that it is more complicated to install a reader and a strike on a door than it is to hang a camera on the wall. Now, not to discount that, but because you do have, I know very well about how complicated it is to get video right, but you have building codes with access control that are more stringent. Than you have much more freedom on where you can hang a camera than how to wire a door.
So, Jonathan, can I introduce you? Can I interrupt you 1 second?
Sure.
And just challenge that thought a little bit on. We certainly have platforms that are open and secure in other parts of the world, right? We've got it in our not necessarily the Apple devices, but in devices, in IT, in networking, and things that are equally complex when we look at the OSI model from layer 1 to layer 7. That's a wicked technical thing. What do you think?
But Rob, but the sales models are different. And because here's the key point. In this industry, nobody likes to pay for software. They don't. And it's like, they'll buy, if you'll have a harder time selling a $500 panel with a $500 software package. People are like, no, I don't want to pay $500 for a software package. But if you just sell them the $1,000 panel, they're like, no problem. And so people basically put their engineering costs, their software costs, and their installation costs into hardware markups. And so every step of the way, so the manufacturer is going to sell it to the integrator for $500. The integrator is going to sell it, and that gives the integrators the incentive to sell. And I'm not saying that it's a perfect model, but that sales model is very deeply embedded into this industry. So with an completely open system, that anybody can write a system to, that anybody can sell, it very much disrupts that, and not necessarily in a good way. Now, I don't have a strong opinion on whether that sales model is correct or not, but it's definitely a headwind against truly open systems, because it's much harder to to mark up your hardware sale to pay for your engineering costs if everybody is selling the same piece of hardware.
I think it's a great point, but let's pick a portion of the market and what I refer to as the foundation of the market. And that's actually just the credential, right? The credential starts a list of decisions that are made that end users and integrators, quite frankly, don't understand the high levels of complexity of, oh, I picked this credential. I just want a card to work with this dang reader. And there's a litany of decisions that they're being made for them that they don't understand. And I look at credentials and go, I think there's an opportunity for standardization, for an open platform to allow lots of different manufacturers to offer interoperability. It's, I think, being challenged a little bit in mobile. And is there an option there? Is there an option in cards? And there are some people beginning to bubble to the top, like Leaf and other things that you're seeing from that. Do you think that's a start from a?
I think it absolutely is. And I mean, because the function of what a credential does is well defined. It is it helps establish your identity, and it authenticates that you are you, and it is part of the authentication process that you are you. And yes, I understand that there's the ability to put other applications on the credential and so forth, but that is a great start for that. It's harder on the controller side with organizations like, well, on VIF-C, PSIA, because what they're standardizing is at a very high level. I not to go off on a tangent, Rob, but if you look at the success of OSDP for reader protocols, it's been very successful because what a credential reader does is quite defined, and but the attempt to standardize what a door controller does is a little bit more difficult because manufacturers put their value add in features at the controller level. And I mean, if you look at Axis with their A1001 panel, every feature that they have, they also had to add into on VIF-C. So you're going to see resistance. You do see resistance from manufacturers to that level of standardization because it goes against what they want to do. But credentials is a great start for that. It's straightforward and woefully needed, I have to say.
Oh, thanks, Jonathan, for that take. I was thinking about a comment you made just a moment ago, which was people don't want to pay for software yet. The funny part of this whole game is that people acquire their hardware products for the most part. If they're a Mercury partner or if they're a non-Mercury partner that has their own hardware, panels, readers, reader controllers, things, they're buying that from a software manufacturer, right? They're, the likes of Linnell, Software House, Brevo, many others, Open Option, all the Acre businesses. They buy those software products and they're charging for software and there's maintenance associated with it. So do you think that it's all being bundled for that sales process, that people don't know the cost of the software and don't know the cost of the hardware and they're just buying one lot, in your opinion? Does that move it?
I think it's hard to say because I can't read minds, but I have seen that there have been players, particularly on the cloud side, that they'll say, you know what, I'm gonna do a cell phone model. I'm basically gonna give the hardware away, and I'll just make it up on the recurring. And what's the acronym for how long a subscriber I don't know what it is, but there's a particular metric in subscription accounting where they realized they just weren't recovering investments fast enough, so they had to charge a little bit, for the hardware. So you can do it. I mean, but again, at the end of the day, you have to cover your engineering expenses, and it, just for whatever reason, the psychology of this business, it makes it easy. People are much more willing to pay to pay it on the hardware side than they are month to month.
Yeah, I think that the model is certainly changing. And in my experience in working in manufacturing, we had that issue where that manufacturer I worked for charged X amount for their hardware, and they gave away their software for a period of time. And they realized that the continuing efforts to support that with the high cost of people, the high cost of the technology, moved them to a model where that wasn't all being covered, where you had millions of dollars being spent on an annual basis for the people to write the updates to the software, the firmware, fixing bugs, and all those things, that it became very difficult to cover that in hardware. And so the industry is definitely moving to a more software-centric model, which I have hope that allows us to be able to interchange respective hardwares, whether it be those locks behind you or other hardware components, panels, edge devices, controllers, that user, that integrator may have their preference for that software platform or their models that they're going out after. They could do that in the future, just interchange those things.
It's interesting. One model that I've seen where things could go to is, have you heard of a networking company called Ubiquiti, Unify Line? It's basically, I would say that they are. I mean, if you put Cisco and their high-end stuff at the top, Ubiquiti would be just a step below that, kind of enterprise light. And so I've been working with a group of low voltage structured cabling technicians called Low Voltage Nation. And they had turned me on to this line of hardware called Ubiquiti, which is like, it's like enterprise light. It's like Cisco, only a little smaller. But what they do is, well, they don't really provide a lot of support, but they provide. I mean, their software is very good. But if you want to control your system, you have an app, you have the controlling software locally. They'll run a registration server for you, so that to basically bridge your mobile app to your own hardware. And perhaps things might go towards that direction, and because you have a lot of people at home. Some people are more tech savvy than others. Even in organizations, some people might not necessarily need to buy an SSA for their access control systems. Like, hey, I can do it myself. I just need a little bit of manufacturer support here and there for updates, for firmware, and maybe might have a community grows around that, like which has for Ubiquiti, to provide what the manufacturer is not doing. And I could see a segment of the building control industry going in that direction, Rob.
That's interesting. And I think that's a great example with one manufacturer from a different industry might come in and have the ability to disrupt. And we're seeing some of that certainly within, the mega techs, where you're seeing Amazon and Apple and Google. They're all beginning to participate in differing worlds, and Ubiquiti and a number of networking manufacturers, whether it be Cisco or others, coming in. And I think there's certainly an opportunity for them to not have the legacy of what has been occurring in access control and come in and disrupt that and move this whole industry forward, which I think will be quite interesting.
Interestingly, I just realized it escaped my mind for the moment, but Ubiquiti itself now has a camera, a VMS line, and as of last month, an access controller line. Now, granted, it only talks to their software, and jury is still out on how successful that's going to be. But I suppose they are running that experiment already.
Yeah, interesting. So, Jonathan, there's probably a billion things that we could talk to you about today. I want to keep the interview, wrap it up a little bit, keep it fairly short so people don't have to sit in front of their computer for hours and hours. And I'd like to welcome you back again. And I think there's a number of topics that we could continue to address. And I'd encourage the listeners and the watchers today to put in the comments things that you'd like us to talk about in the future, whether it be a manufacturer specific or honestly a topic of panels or a topic of wireless locks or a topic of credentials, because Jonathan has a wide range of experience. And Jonathan, would you be happy to come join us at a different time to talk more in depth on some of those things?
Oh yes, my pleasure.
Great. And if people want to get a hold of you, Jonathan, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, I mean, a number of different ways. You can go to my website, which is trecerdo.com.
How do you spell that?
It's TRECERDO.com.
Now, me being having the ability to speak multiple languages, that's the thirdpig.com, right?
Yes. It is something I came up with. I learned Spanish in high school, and thought I never would use it, but it turns out I have. I've done a lot of access control work in Latin America, and it's amazing how things come back when they need to.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Jonathan, for the time. Again, you can reach Jonathan at his website at trecerdo.com. Jonathan, Lawry, it's been an awesome time having you on the show today. Thank you very much for joining us.
And thank you for having me.